Welcome to Conversations with Caleb, a periodic communications experiment for St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Wilmington, North Carolina. This week we welcome Ellen Weig, Archivist for St. Paul's. Hello everyone, welcome to the second episode of Interviews at St. Paul's. We are with the famous Ellen Weig, who is our archivist at St. Paul's and does a fabulous job over and beyond. And her work here at St. Paul's is just so important to the life of the church. And here she is in the flesh, or at least on the screen. Ellen Weig, welcome to this interview. Can you tell me what you do as archivist at St. Paul's?
Yes, good morning. Yeah, I'm actually happy to be able to have a conversation about this. Thank you. I've been doing history since retiring and moving to North Carolina in 2005. I started at St. Matthew's Church in Hillsborough doing research for their History and Archives Committee. And when I moved to Wilmington in 2015, the rector was Dina Whalen at the time. And when we met her, she asked me what I'd been doing, and I said a little history and archives and a lot of research. And she said, "I have a task for you. Please set up an archives." I was like, okay. What I did was I went to the National Episcopal Church's archive website, and they have a lot of resources for parishes, and especially small parishes. How to set up an archives, how to organize and keep records. And so I used that, but I also used the archives website as a guide for setting up a mission statement. And when you said you were going to ask me this question, I thought, well, I really would like people to know what the mission statement for the archives is. So if you don't mind, I'll take a second and read it.
Please do.
St. Paul's Episcopal Church celebrates and supports a historical legacy founded upon a rich heritage with deep roots in the Wilmington community, the state of North Carolina, and the Episcopal Church. We seek to preserve our institutional memories in order to realize the creative future of the parish and to provide knowledge and resources that strengthen both the missions and ministries of a faithful and diverse church community.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that. It sounds like that fits right into the richness of our own parish and how important it is to tell our story.
And that was my motivation. The second part of it was setting up some objectives, and things like providing archival materials for preservation. You can see some of the boxes behind me. We have parish registers, vestry records, architectural records, clergy papers, old history, deed records, and they are important documents for the parish and needed preservation. A second thing was encouraging clergy and staff and committees in the vestry and parishioners to engage in the preservation effort and ongoing maintenance of records, because our history doesn't stop, it's ongoing. Developing projects for history, developing a finding aid. So all of these things were sort of spinning in my head. Lucianne Glover and Dr. Larry Cook had written a history of St. Paul's. And the materials that they had used had needed to be organized and preserved. So again, that was part of maintaining, preserving not just the records, but our story. They were also very fertile ground for research and digging deeper. When I read the book, I would sit there and I'd say, why did she write that? Um, Lucienne was a Wilmingtonian and she knew things. And she knew the history of Wilmington. She knew the history of the history of St. Paul's. So she didn't always footnote things, but um, that's where, when I read the book, I could tell there was a much deeper story. Um, so that's sort of the research side of the archives, is being able to use the materials and the records that we have as a starting point to look deeper and say, what's the backstory to this? What leads us to this point? So looking at our story, our history through kind of a genealogical lens to a certain degree, being able to think about who were the people of St. Paul's at various times in our history. What was their formation? What were their struggles? What were the walls that occasionally they had their backs up against?
Mm.
Uh,
That
and
leads
now
me to one of the questions that I have for you, about this past summer and how you led a very rich adult formation series on the history of St. Paul's. Um, you'll have to excuse the background noise. We work and live downtown on the major thoroughfare. We'll pray for whoever that ambulance is for. But you did have a very rich class this summer, very well attended, on the history of St. Paul's. Can you say a little bit about that experience and uh, how that worked out, or how that enriched your own life and the life of the parish?
it was a challenge, um, because we do have 165 years of history, in two locations, three different buildings, beginning in the um, 1850s, a lot of Wilmington and history in the South. Um, it, like I say, it almost is a spiritual autobiography for St. Paul's as a parish family. I'm, incredibly grateful to the people who did attend, because their questions and their thoughts were very thought provoking for all of us. I think one of the things that I started to think about afterwards was that we talk about telling the truth, especially these days. And I thought, maybe the place that we really need to be starting is learning the truth and digging deeper and learning who we were, what our struggles were, what was going on in the world around us, in the community around us, during those, 165 years, in order to look at St. Paul's not just as its own church, and for a period of time as a Black church, um, and a school after the Civil War, but looking at it in the context of Wilmington and Southern history, and how St. Paul's as a church for working class, that began as a church for working class and enslaved people and freedmen, became a very strong Black congregation for a period of time. And then when they built St. Mark's and left St. Paul's building, and our reorganization in 1872 as a white church, hearing and learning those stories is the starting place for being able to look at the truths of our parish history in greater Wilmington, New Hanover County, and the South.
Yeah, and that's, our particular history, and this isn't the format for which we tell you all the history. There's some history online, listeners, but um, our history and your particular work with it has led you to be participating, being asked to participate in a very special event coming up. Can you tell us what that is?
The African American Episcopal Historical Collection at Virginia Theological Seminary is celebrating its 20th anniversary. They are holding a symposium in October, and it is a joint project between the Historical Society of the Episcopal Church and Payne Library to have this collection on site there. The purpose of the collection is to preserve the Black Episcopal experience. They are collecting documents, preserving records. They are in archives themselves. You had introduced me to Riley Temple, who is the collection growth specialist. And he and I had a couple of conversations since I met him. He had seen our website and our history and wanted to know more. So I did a brief oral history for him, and then he said he was going to issue me an invitation to participate in this event. So I will be going in October, October 11th, and the theme for the panel discussion that I will be part of is how we became a segregated church and how we are uncovering and learning and beginning to talk about our parish histories, and how we are finding ways to use that learning to bring us to a point where we're thinking about racial healing.
Yeah, and I think that the work that the parish has done with Sacred Ground has been part of that for sure. And building on that this summer with the history adult formation class you gave, where we really dug into that history. Bishop Atkinson and Josepha, their work in just beginning St. Paul's, the history of St. Paul's being in the little Protestant chapel on 4th and Orange. Is that the first location?
It is. Yeah. It was a Methodist Protestant small church denomination, very much a rural denomination. So the city church was failing. They had a primarily Black congregation. It was Black and white. And I think there was a merging of the minds when they approached Bishop Atkinson. He had just moved into Wilmington as a new bishop, relatively new bishop in the diocese. And they merged denominations, they merged racially, they began a congregation of working class, poor, enslaved, freed, and white members. It was something that Atkinson had charged his laity and clergy with in 1855, is that it needed to be a church for everyone.
This pre-Civil War, right? I mean, this is very cutting edge for the South in Wilmington.
Absolutely.
And then our records get a little squirrely during the Civil War, I imagine.
They do. Well, I mean, a lot of people left Wilmington. The church was all but closed. But when the war was over, Bishop Atkinson used the church building at 4th and Orange for a Freedmen's Commission school. And as a Black mission church, he essentially gave the building to the Black population that had been there, and they they used it as their church and school until they were able to raise enough money and build St. Mark's. And it was after that that we reorganized, and considering historically, again, the time, reorganized as a white-only congregation.
And we're just scratching the surface, right? One of the things about your job is that you go down rabbit holes, necessary rabbit holes,
Yes.
that makes the history even fuller, help us understand who we are even more, and what our role was in the community, and what our role is uh, spiritually, DNA wise, who we are as the people of God at St. Paul's. So I
Mhm.
just commend you for your work. I'm so grateful for it. I'm so excited about your participation in the seminar coming up. I'm actually so excited. I'm gonna meet you there and support you that way. I ask the congregation for your prayers for this event as we discover more and more who we are as the people of God, as we deal with race in the church and our own history. And say your prayers for October 11th. There's a lot more that we could talk about, but I just want to give everybody a little sneak peek about all the fabulous work that Ellen Weig does, and just commend her for her work in this place. And so say your prayers on October 11th for the 20th anniversary of the African American Episcopal Historical Collection at VTS. And we'll hope to hear about a little bit more about it after she returns.
Well, it's a joy for me to be able to take St. Paul's there.
Excellent. We can't wait. Many blessings, Ellen. Good luck in
Thank you.
preparations.